1997. Moscow Oblast, Mental Hospital number 2. 2 strong hospital attendants could barely drag a drunken woman in a dirty dress along the corridor. First, she resisted and refused to go, then rushed to embrace doctors and began to dance. It was here that she felt she was in the right place. She was so happy. There are so many people, and all their attention is focused on her. Take her away now! In her life, this scene was repeated many times. Only the entourage changed. First, expensive restaurants, then the kitchen of her own apartment, a dirty staircase, and finally, the alcoholics department of a mental hospital. It is here where the glamorous Soviet princess Galina Brezhnev spent her last days. She danced on a table, showing photographers her underwear. She got involved in drunken brawls at the Kremlin. She started affairs in front of millions of people and shocked foreign diplomats with her provocative clothes. For her entire life, this woman had been passionately fighting for her freedom. From her father, who dictated how she lived, and from the conventions required by her status as the Kremlin princess. She could have become a successful actress, a good mother, and a wonderful wife. But confrontation with her father ruined everything. Brezhneva ended her days in a mental hospital, alone and ill. It was the freedom for which she had fought so passionately. But when she obtained it, she lost everything. (1997) Moscow Oblast, Mental Hospital number 2. Galina was sneaking along the corridor. In her head, there was only one thought: to get out of here. She couldn't stay in the hospital any longer. She had been there for 3 years, kept under lock and key. Galina had been planning her escape all week, and finally, she was going to do it. All she had to do was go downstairs and along the corridor. She heard the footsteps of hospital attendants behind her. Her heart was bursting out of her chest. She can't give up just like that. She can already see the front door. Just a little further, and she will be free to begin a new life. It gave her the strength to make the bravest deed of her life, a deed that eventually cost her her freedom. 1947, Moscow. Gasping for breath, she ran up the stairs. Galina was terribly late. That day was a very important day in her life. 18-year-old Galina was entering the Theatre Institute. A moment later, she was on stage. On that day, Galia played Juliet before the members of the admissions department. She noticed teachers watching her with approval. 18-year-old Brezhneva wanted to weep with joy. Here it is, her hour of triumph. She's been preparing for this performance for months, learning the lines, rehearsing. And when the time had come, she quietly packed up and went from Dnipropetrovsk to Moscow. Galina wanted to surprise her parents, to return home with a student ticket in her pocket. But Galina did not know that the decision regarding her entrance to Moscow had long been made. Enough, thank you. Thank you very much. She looked into her teacher's eyes and couldn't hold back the tears. Why are these people looking away? The teachers, who were so friendly just a moment before, were brushing her aside. They said she lacked talent. That was all she heard. Galina's disappointment was limitless. Had all her efforts been in vain? Was she really useless? Galia felt exhausted, devastated. Her dream collapsed in one moment, and now she didn't know what to do. The corridor was filled with enthusiastic students. Nobody cared about the tearful, heartbroken girl helplessly sitting in the corner. Her fate was decided by one call from her father. Being an actress in the Soviet Union at that time wasn't considered very prestigious, and for an official's daughter, it was totally unacceptable. The first secretary of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast Party Committee, Leonid Brezhnev, was successfully building his career. His biography had to be perfect, which is why an actress' daughter didn't fit in with this ideal. He wasn't straight with her. He didn't say, "My girl, you cannot do that. I have a status. I have this, I have that. You cannot be an actress. Do whatever you want, but not now." Maybe she would have accepted this. But to say, "Well, I do not want you to do that, but once you have decided, do it." And then to make a call to say, "She mustn't enter." This is the element of betrayal. When Galina discovered the truth, she became resentful. Without realizing it, Brezhnev had struck a second fatal blow to his beloved daughter. And this time, nothing would be able to fix it. 1945, Dnipropetrovsk. That night, 16-year-old Galia couldn't sleep. She had recently been going crazy. But of course, each day she was expecting her father to return from the front. The girl had been dreaming about this meeting for 4 long years of war. She wrote him letters, sent them to the front, and waited impatiently for his replies. Brezhnev was everything to Galina: a protector, an advisor, best friend, and role model. And there was his voice. Galia merrily ran to the kitchen door and suddenly froze. Why are her parents quarreling? Why is her mom crying? The girl listened. Brezhnev was nervously pacing the room. He was afraid to look his wife in the eye. "You're a traitor! I hate you!" He has another woman. They love each other and want to live together. Galia had to cover her mouth so as not to be heard. She wanted to run away, to hide, to forget everything. Could it be her daddy no longer loves her? What has she done wrong? Galia couldn't understand the reason for her father's strange behavior. That is why she was blaming herself during her parents' fight. In a few years, Galina would stop reproaching herself for her father's unfaithfulness, but she would never forget him hurting her. Brezhnev would not leave his family. As a result, his relationship with his daughter would be ruined forever. Children always take it as a slap in the face, as an insult, a betrayal. They always take sides with the hurt mother. This is all seen through the eyes of a girl who will never forget, "You have brought a different woman into my life, and look what you have done to us." This was the second psychological trauma that Galina had to endure. I believe it affected her entire life, as well as the way she died. Brezhnev's favorite daughter, an open and loving girl, would gradually begin to change. She would become silent, nervous, and quarrelsome. After failing her exams at the Theatre Institute, she avoided her father more and more, building up to a serious protest. At home in Dnipropetrovsk, Leonid Brezhnev won Galina a place at the Language and Literature Department of the local institute. She would go to school, but refuse to join the Komsomol. Thus, Galina would strike the first blow to the reputation of her influential father. Her life became a constant struggle for independence. Leonid Brezhnev even tried to influence her through some Komsomol organizations. He thought that maybe it would have some effect, but it didn't. She believed he had no right to control her personal life. As a student, she loved to arrange parties for her fellow students. She would take expensive cognacs, wines, and liqueurs from her father's cupboard. Galina often stayed up all night with her friends getting drunk. It made her feel independent and brave. She spent her whole life trying to undo her parents' failure. They had destroyed her childhood dreams. Galina and her parents would pay dearly. She ended up dedicating her entire life to this unrealistic theatrical career. But her father would always win. He would find her and bring her back home, causing a scandal. Her father never dared to raise his hand to her, and Galina knew that. She felt a hard blow to her back. Galina wearily sat down on the floor. She wanted to cry out. She was once again dragged into a hateful hospital ward that was more like a prison. Galina was kicking and screaming, but the nurses were much stronger. One injection of sedative, and Brezhneva fell into oblivion. Her body felt warm. She couldn't move. Yes, she didn't try to escape, but this does not mean she wouldn't try again. Suddenly, her consciousness returned. She had found a solution. Her daughter, her little Vikusia. She wouldn't leave her mother in the hospital like that. Vika loves her dearly. 1956. Moscow. Galina was furiously smashing china. She didn't care that her frightened little daughter Vika was watching. Let the girl know what a terrible father she has. Galina had started the fight. She saw what delights her husband, the famous USSR circus performer Yevgeny Milyev, took from looking at his colleague. Now, Galina was going crazy with jealousy. Vikusia was terrified. She had never seen her mother so irritated. The girl cried and grabbed her mother's dress, but Galina roughly pushed her away. She couldn't restrain herself, even in front of the child. They'd been married for 5 years. The circus performer Milyev became Galina Brezhneva's first and greatest love. Because of him, she took the desperate step of running away from home and secretly getting married. For the first time, Leonid Brezhnev had lost the battle with his daughter, but he accepted defeat and even welcomed the newlyweds into the family, and it decided the fate of their marriage forever. They got married, and you know, because of that, I had a conversation with Leonid Ilyich. He came over and told me. I came to their dacha at Zarechya. So he came to me and said, "Shame on you, you've disgraced me." He discovered that they'd married on The Voice of America. I said, "Leonid Ilyich, I didn't know myself." And he hadn't talked to the people in the wedding photo for a long time. They had gravely insulted him. He was very upset by the marriage and hadn't talked with Milya for a very long time. Another plate flew into the air, but someone's hand gripped Galina's wrist. Brezhnev could do nothing but interfere. He was protecting his son-in-law. Oddly enough, his acceptance of Milyev was her personal defeat, because when you take revenge on a man and challenge him, you expect resistance. Brezhnev did as a wise Oriental philosopher would do. He used psychological aikido. He gave in, showed no resistance, and thereby deprived her of her strength. He accepted him. However, Galina interpreted Brezhnev's actions differently. Her father justifies her unfaithful husband because he himself had a lot of mistresses, and now he's trying to control her life again. No, she couldn't let this happen, and now to avenge her father, she was ready to cross the last line, to destroy her own family and leave her beloved husband. She loved Milyev all her life. And during the hard times, when I was with her, she was thinking only of her when she lived with Milyev. It was hard for her after living such a luxurious life. She was beautiful and wonderful. Everyone loved her. Everyone was singing her praises. They took everything. And then, alas, if there hadn't been long-standing opposition to Brezhnev, this fight could have ended in reconciliation. But Galina no longer thought about it. This situation couldn't have ended in a long-term relationship, since she acted only to spite her father. Of course, this is not the action of a grown woman. A family stays together when they plan for the future. She had no plans. Passion is not a plan. Passion lasts for a few months, and then it fades. Then the real relationship begins. Hair rollers, kids, plans. She would divorce her husband and leave her only daughter in the care of her grandparents. And little Vika would only see her mother a few times a year. The feelings she had for her only daughter were a sacrifice, which Galina made of her own free will. Then she stopped caring. She had her entire life ahead of her, and she wanted to enjoy it. There's a visitor for you. 1997, Moscow Oblast, Mental Hospital Number 2. Galina happily jumped out of bed. Igor Kio. This person really meant a lot to her, and she really wanted to see him again. So many years had passed, but he was just as beautiful, tall and handsome. He still remembers her, and maybe even loves her. Galina looked into a large mirror. Brezhneva froze. Could she really have become this old, wrinkled woman? Surely not. So are you coming? Yes? 1961, Sochi. The newlyweds exchanged rings. Galia smiled at her husband. She felt completely happy. Brezhneva's new husband, the illusionist Igor Kio, was 14 years younger than Galina. Leonid Brezhnev couldn't approve of this relationship. She ran away with her lover to Sochi and secretly got married to him in the local registry office. Galina was celebrating her victory. She won this round against Brezhnev. Galina imagined how angry her father would be after learning about it all. Not for a minute did she regret what she had done. She enjoyed her new marriage, not knowing that it would last only 9 days. Watch next. special operation of the KGB to arrest Galina Brezhneva. Why was the daughter of the General Secretary sent to Moscow under a military escort? The bloody war with the General Secretary, scandalous dancing on a table and crazy affairs, which would be the talk of the entire country. How and why Galina provoked her all-powerful father. The end of the Brezhnev era. The death of the General Secretary and long-awaited freedom, which cost Brezhneva her life. (1961) Sochi. Galina was crying hysterically. She couldn't believe what she'd heard. She, a 32-year-old woman, the daughter of the influential member of the Politburo, was ordered to be taken under escort to Moscow as a prisoner. But Brezhneva couldn't do anything about it. It was on her father's orders. His victory was her bitter defeat. Their marriage was dissolved. Brezhnev had run out of patience. Not only had he dissolved the marriage, but the KGB officers took Igor Kio and Galina Brezhneva's passports and tore out the marriage registration pages. Galina Brezhneva was taken away. They put her into a car and took her away to her father. But once again, they were not punished because it was not a crime. This irritated Brezhnev because it harmed his image as head of state and party. Under escort, Galina was taken out of the hotel room. She tried to resist, but the people in grey suits held her tightly. Galia helplessly looked at Kio. She didn't know that she wouldn't see him again in 20 years. Their passports would be replaced with new ones. Their marriage would be nullified. The illusionist Igor Kio wouldn't be allowed into Moscow for a long time. And Galina would become her father's prisoner. She would be forced to move into her father's apartment. In an attempt to block out the pain, Galina Brezhneva begins drinking. From then on, her life becomes a very public series of fights and scandals. During her alcoholism, she really burned the candle at both ends. She became promiscuous and found herself the butt of her friends' jokes. At one point, she even broke into a restaurant. She continued to rebel against her father, who led a decent lifestyle and was the righteous man of the Soviet Union. She would appear in the Kremlin half naked, in transparent dresses. She would get drunk at official banquets and start dancing. She would have many lovers and would spread incredible rumors about herself. Her free living certainly annoyed her father. He found her a job. She worked in Moscow in the press agency Novosti and at the archival department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She was constantly watched over, but it was impossible to keep an eye on her all the time. She was always appearing in police reports or in some scandalous incident. At that time, her ex-husband Igor Kio returned to the capital. But Galina didn't want to meet with him. She no longer wanted to fight for his love. Galina accepted defeat and was ready to move on, not for her own sake, but for the sake of revenge, which would destroy her life. 1997. Moscow Oblast, Mental Hospital number 2. She looked at her ex-love and wept. Galina couldn't come out to Kio. She couldn't appear before him as a miserable old woman. Most of all, Brezhneva feared being pitted. Let Kio remember her as she was, a slender beauty whom he'd fallen madly in love with on tour, a fearless woman who knew how to fight, but not anymore. Galina was frantically rummaging through her things. Here it is, the dress in which she was taken to hospital. If shortened slightly, it will be very beautiful. There's always the next time. She will surely pull herself together and once again become that splendid Galina Brezhneva who attracted all the most attractive men. It awoke her excitement. She tried the dress on and buttoned up the large black buttons. He was nervously working on the stubborn buttonholes. Yuri Churbanov would not calm down. That day, he was planning to visit his ex-wife Galina Brezhneva in a sanatorium near Moscow. He was told that she had gone there to improve her health. Churbanov did not know that she was actually in a mental hospital. Galina, with her influence and connections, was his only chance to better his life after he was released from prison. And she will surely help him. After all, he was imprisoned because of her. After the death of General Secretary Brezhnev, his successor, Yuri Andropov, purged the Politburo, organizing show trials. In the heat of the moment, Leonid Brezhnev's son-in-law, Yuri Churbanov, was tried for bribery and abuse of authorities. Only 3 of over 100 charges were proved, but that was enough for a 12-year prison sentence. Churbanov served half the sentence. And now, he was going to visit his ex-wife and help restore his former status. Galina was shortening her dress with nail scissors. But one look into the mirror shattered all her illusions. Wrinkles, dark eyes, and pale lips. But that's fine. All she needs is a little makeup. Galina rushed to the mirror and carefully applied cosmetics. Yuri Churbanov glanced at himself in the mirror for the last time and was pleased with his appearance. Galina will be happy to help again. 1971, Moscow. Churbanov was standing in a crowd of onlookers. He was very embarrassed. Galina went on a crazy spree again. He couldn't get used to it, although her drunken brawls were common. But what he saw in the restaurant shocked even him. His drunk wife and a dubious-looking man were trying to get into the Writer's House restaurant through a back window. A crowd was cheering them on. He knew she was cheating on him, that she lived with some circus performers and traveled abroad a lot. But she didn't report back to Churbanov, the police general given to her according to her status. He sent his informants who reported back about Galina Brezhnev's tricks, but he couldn't raise his hand to her. Churbanov was filled with shame. Tomorrow, the whole of Moscow will be buzzing about it. He was imagining how his influential father-in-law would reproach him. In order to become Brezhnev's son-in-law, Cherbanov divorced and abandoned his children. But the General Secretary shut his eyes to it. Brezhnev liked Cherbanov, a man with a serious profession who was able to tame his wild-tempered wife. Cherbanov struggled to get Galina into his car.
I hate you! I hate you both! You've ruined my entire life!
Cherbanov couldn't understand. He thought she was drunk again. Cherbanov couldn't remember when Galina had changed from a gentle, loving wife into a nervous, hysterical bitch. Brezhnev's son-in-law didn't realize that he was the cause of her breakdown. 1970, Moscow. That evening, they were entertaining Cherbanov's colleagues. Galia was trying hard to be the perfect hostess. This was a new role for Galina. When she met Cherbanov, Brezhneva's wild life ended. There's something known as subconscious defense. I think this perfectly sums up Cherbanov. Why do you need protection from your own father? She behaved badly in order to spite her father. She found the protection she needed in her officer. After their marriage, she finally reconciled issues with her father. Scandals within the family stopped, and Galina happily took on the role of the good housewife. She called him every day to find out how he was. She wanted to call her husband to the kitchen when she heard the drunken laughter. As they say, one who marries like Cherbanov never needs a full purse. These words hurt Galina. But the worst thing was that they came from her husband. Luxurious apartment in downtown Moscow, furniture, dacha, and 2 cars. This was the dowry given to Cherbanov by his father-in-law after the wedding. But the main reward was yet to come, the rank of Lieutenant General and the post of First Deputy Minister of the Interior Ministry. Galina encouraged her husband's career advancement. But what she overheard was devastating. Friends told her that Cherbanov loved boasting about his easy life behind Galina's back. But Galina stubbornly refused to believe it. But now she realized that her husband didn't love her. All he wanted was the status given to him through the blood of the General Secretary's family. A cautionary tale, because the Lieutenant Colonel for Political Affairs immediately began to do well in his career. He soon became a colonel, then Major General. 6 or 7 years after the wedding, and he had already become a Colonel General, Deputy of Interior Minister. He received great power, but not over his wife. The higher his rank, the less Galina Brezhneva liked him. Galina wouldn't tell her husband anything. She would once again drown her humiliation and sorrow in enormous amounts of alcohol. And once again, she blamed her father for her broken life. Here was a man who loved Cherbanov, but barely noticed his own daughter. (1997), Moscow Oblast, Mental Hospital Number 2. Cherbanov was killing time in the waiting room, nervously crumpling a bouquet of flowers in his hands. Why is Galina in a mental hospital? How will she meet him? What if she refuses to help? After all, she was so unpredictable. He waited for over an hour, but she still didn't appear. He gently opened the door and looked into the ward. In an empty room, a fat woman was twisting in front of the mirror. She wore terrible makeup and a revealingly short dress. She looked like a scarecrow. But even so, Cherbanov recognized her. It was Galina Brezhneva. Once the most beautiful woman in the USSR. Final detail, and Galia was ready to go. Now she was not ashamed to appear before her visitor. She was happy. Cherbanov must have come to apologize. He still loves her and wants to take her home. Galina opened the door. The waiting room was empty. She looked around, searching for her husband. How could she have been so cruelly deceived? Maybe Cherbanov was waiting for her in the street. Maybe he's late. Her eyes rested on a bouquet of wine-red roses. He always used to give her wine-red roses. No, not again. She will not survive another lie. She wanted to scream out of loneliness and because of a broken heart. She felt abandoned, useless, but couldn't bring herself to show her true feelings. She couldn't stop singing. In a large apartment in downtown Moscow, Galina Brezhneva was partying hard. She was drinking vodka straight from the bottle and dancing provocatively on the table. She pulled up her skirt, revealing her legs. She didn't care that there were strangers there, and that the next day, her scandalous photos would appear in the Western press. It was a miserable, drunken end, you know? Everyone abandoned her. Nobody wanted to see her. When a foreign film company came to meet her, she welcomed them into Brezhnev's apartment and began to dance drunkenly on the table. By now, she was fat and unattractive. The foreign film company took pictures of her. She wanted to cry, but instead was singing a monotonous song. She wanted to be alone, but had filled her house with unfamiliar people. An hour before, Leonid Brezhnev suffered a heart attack. The doctor's prognosis was not good. The General Secretary was slowly dying. 1982, Moscow. She was sitting on the floor of her apartment and could not believe what had happened. Was her father really gone? She had seen the coffin, the body, and the lavish funeral procession with her own eyes. And now, Galina felt absolutely devastated. The system is collapsing, and here's a very interesting phenomenon. She loses the main person whom she's resisted her whole life. It would seem, well, here you go. You're miserable, your husband is in prison, your father has died, you have no support. It's a very interesting phenomenon when you have no one left to fight with. Your life becomes meaningless. She couldn't figure out what she wanted. Her entire life was one big confrontation with this person. She loved and hated him, and now he was gone. And for the first time, Galina didn't know what to do. Her father's death, of course, was shocking. She changed from an energetic, beautiful woman into a sad loser. There was no one left to show off to. Her scandalous behavior didn't surprise anyone and was no longer interesting. Nobody lent her a hand, you know, so the calls stopped, everything stopped. They'd forgotten that there was Leonid Brezhnev, that he was the general secretary. She had to live on, but Galina didn't know how. She didn't know anything but alcohol and scandal. It got to the point where she sold all her valuables before ending up in a mental hospital. Brezhneva's daughter, Victoria, would never visit her mother in the asylum, and all the letters written to her by Galina were placed in a drawer unread. She would forget about her mother, just as her mother had done to her. I don't think she understood her mother's life. She was deeply unhappy and began blaming her father for everything. She too was deeply dysfunctional and had a problem with intimacy. Why didn't she come to the asylum? Because she has no mother. 1997. Moscow Oblast. Mental Hospital number 2. Galina was staring at a white figure leaning over her bed. A smile lit up her face. Has someone come for her? The stranger's features became more clear. Galina recognized her doctor. Galina Leonidovna, we've made the tests. You have cirrhosis. You have only 2 months left to live. The doctor was long looking at the patient. The silence was broken by a loud, merry laugh. Galina was as happy as a child. Cirrhosis, a couple of months. What other lies can these doctors tell her? Soon she will go. Only her friends were informed. The doctors were wrong. Brezhneva only had a couple of weeks to live, during which she wrote letters to her numerous friends. To those for whom she had done so much. Some offered to buy her friends cars and flats, but no one replied. Galina Brezhneva outlived her father by 16 long years. These were the years of loneliness and collapse. The collapse of the woman who had everything: family, love, power and money. For the sake of revenge, she sacrificed it all. The splendid Kremlin princess was dying in a mental hospital alone. She kept on hoping that her friends would rescue her from this awful place. She deteriorated rapidly, but didn't regret a thing.